Yo, what's up, YouTube? My name is Neil,
And I'm Rohit.
and for those of y'all who are new, we're both consultants at Bain, and with this channel, we like to make videos that will help you go through the consulting process. But in today's video specifically, Rohit and I are going to talk about the reasons that got us interested in consulting and essentially what we hoped to get out of it.
So the way the video is going to be structured is I'll go first into my reasons why I decided to do consulting, and then we'll do Neil. And in the end, we'll explain some reasons that other people would go into consulting that was outside of the two of our reasons.
But before we jump into Rohit and my reasonings, as usual, if there are any other things that y'all would like us to cover, or if you like the video, please give the video a like and let us know in the comments below whether there's anything else you'd like us to cover. And then one other thing that I wanted to point out that Rohit and I have in the description of all of our videos, but we've essentially created consulting resources, both case books and then also other documents that honestly we think are the best documents out there for consulting. They're going to be in the description below. I know most of y'all might know about them, but for the people who are new, we just wanted to call that out. But anyway, let's get into the video. All right, so now let's go into the reasons Rohit was interested in consulting. So yeah, Rohit, could you tell us a little bit more about what got you interested in consulting and what you hope to get out of it?
Yeah, definitely. So honestly, when I started out, consulting was kind of this really prestigious thing that I just heard about from people. When I was a freshman, a professor gave a talk in one of my classes, and he basically was like, yo, management consulting is really top tier. It's really hard to get into. And, consultants probably have the coolest lifestyle. So that really got me interested initially, just because I think inherently I'm kind of a competitive person.
Yeah.
And I like competition and doing hard things. And so that kind of got me on the hedonic treadmill. But from there, I learned a lot more from consulting. Honestly, a lot of it was from Neil because Neil was my roommate in college.
Yeah.
And I also worked in the startup space for a little bit. And I think a lot of the reasons why I wanted to go into consulting kind of came out of that startup experience. And so I'll dive into really four main reasons that was the case. The first reason was through startups, I realized that I really loved problem solving. It's kind of just you're problem solving every day. There's problems that come up, customers call you, there's product developments you need to make. And so these are all mini problems that I loved solving on a day-to-day basis. And I thought consulting was pretty similar in the sense that you have maybe not a lot of very small problems, but a really big problem that then you kind of break down and solve as a team. So that was the first thing that got me really interested in consulting. The second thing that I learned from startups was I really liked being around smart, driven, just kind and nice people. And I thought through the networking events and through reaching out to people, I learned a lot about Bain and Bain's culture and the people there, and not just Bain, all the consulting firms, but all the people there I thought were really, really smart, really driven, and I thought I could learn a lot from them. Essentially, I saw them as kind of like me in a best case scenario in 5 to 10 years, but they had accumulated a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that I didn't have being 19 or 20 years old. So that was one thing that really led me to want to do consulting. The third reason was through startups I realized that I didn't have a lot of skill sets that I think I would need to really be successful. And so some of the skill sets I think are really prevalent in consulting. So they're things like doing really heavy number crunching, being able to talk to clients, being able to engage various stakeholders like experts, and just working with a pretty smart and driven team and being able to lead a team. I think Bain teams are really productive and they do a really, really good job in a very short amount of time, which is kind of essential skill that you need in startups. And so yeah, I think those skill sets were something that I wanted to learn in a way that was very kind of world-class, top tier. I think Bain does a really, really good job of training people as a young consultant. And so yeah, that was the third reason. Finally, the fourth reason, and I think this reason is probably the most important reason, is just that the kind of people that you meet at Bain, I think are really pivotal to your career. And I think this was best summarized by a partner when I talked to him about my experiences with startups and Bain. And he really honed in the point that Bain introduces you to people who would be great co-founders. Having the network of Bain gets you introduced to many investors. People are more willing to talk to you because you have a Bain background and you have the credibility. People know you have the training. Even when you want to get acquired, when you want to hire people, just you have a great network to depend on. And then finally, I think you can see a lot of that success already in the real world. There are a lot of successful entrepreneurs that have come out of consulting, and even the CEO of YouTube actually is a former Bainey.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really?
Yeah, Susan.
Oh,
Wojcicki.
cool. Nice.
Yeah. The founder of ClassPass, the founder of Warby Parker, founder of Played.
I think the founder of League of Legends as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
That's hilarious. But yeah, no, I mean a lot of really great entrepreneurs have come out of consulting, and so I kind of knew this was a great place to start the career.
Those are all fantastic reasons. Given that you've just finished your internship, do you like those reasons that you initially mentioned about consulting and why you wanted to go into it, do you think, like, how has your opinion on that changed? Do you think it still stayed the same or gotten stronger or what?
Yeah, so if anything, I think it's gotten stronger. So through the network that I kind of, or network's a bad word, but through the relationships that I kind of developed at Bain, I've been able to depend on them a lot. So even right now, when I'm running my startup and I have questions, I can call up previous team members that I've worked with during the internship, and they usually have really great advice on what to do and what the next step should be. So yeah, ultimately, I think all the reasons that I initially wanted to go into consulting were kind of strengthened by the internship.
Cool. That's good to hear, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we can go into kind of your reasoning behind wanting to go into consulting.
Yeah, totally. So some of my reasons were pretty similar to Rohit's and some pretty different. But I'll try to also highlight, given the fact that I've worked at Bain now for about a year and also did the internship like Rohit did, I'll try to highlight how my initial interests in wanting to go into consulting and what I hope to get out of it when I was a junior or senior in college have changed now that I'm actually in the job and have been in it for about, I think, 13 to 14 months. I think for any of y'all who have seen the My Story video that I made a couple weeks ago, at this point that you all would be watching this video, I talked about how I was an engineering major at UT Dallas and was transitioning to do something outside of engineering. And so initially, I just wanted consulting mainly as a way for me to be able to get out of engineering and then be able to get into a career path that I think would more align with my interests. And those interests being, not wanting to work on super technical problems, wanting to work in teams in a fast-paced environment, wanting to get a better understanding of businesses. I was also pretty interested initially in the prospect of going to business school. And for those of y'all who might not know, and I don't know if this is true around the world, so don't take this as a gospel, but especially within the US and I'm sure in other parts of the world, within Bain, and I know this probably also applies to McKinsey and BCG, but they will sponsor your business school. So you go to business school for 2 years, they pay for 100% of it, and then you come back afterward to work for a couple years. And I thought that deal would be pretty attractive. And then, of course, also some things that Rohit mentioned, like prestige, right? I was definitely caught a little bit by the allure of consulting firms working for a big three firm, especially considering that the undergrad education that Rohit and I have weren't going to give us that kind of prestige. And then lastly, just wanting to have a broad understanding of the kind of industries that I'd want to work in later on in life. And even just to be able to understand what all industries are out there, even some that I might not have heard about before. So that kind of summarizes all of the points that I initially wanted to go into consulting, and that's kind of changed a little bit. So now when I think about what I want to get into consulting, there's 3.5 reasons, I guess I could say, of what I'm hoping to get out of consulting. The first one is skills. And when I say skills, I mean specifically a couple of things. The first one is about breaking down problems that seem insurmountable but break them down into bite-sized chunks. So something that Rohit mentioned earlier, and even something I got through my engineering experience in undergrad, but I think especially as it relates to business problems or problems that in later on in life I might find myself facing as an entrepreneur. And then within skills as well is being able to manage people. So I think at Bain and these other consulting firms, you get to manage people relatively quickly, within 2 to 3 years of starting, which is pretty rare, I think, for most post-undergrad positions. And so that's I think a really important skill and one that I find really interesting because I really enjoy working with people and that mentorship aspect of Bain's culture. The second thing that I'm continuing to hope to get out of consulting is people. And so I think Rohit mentioned this a lot in his answer, and it definitely applies to mine as well. But the people at Bain are phenomenal, and they go on to do pretty cool things. And in general, just like interesting people that I enjoy getting to meet on a one-on-one basis. And so I just want to continue to get to meet people, not even just within like the Dallas or the Texas office within Bain where I'm at, but also like across the world whenever I happen to meet them, on cases or whatever events it might be. My third reason honestly kind of ties pretty closely to my first one, which is just to be able to better understand business and businesses so that whenever I go and do something more entrepreneurial, I have a better understanding of the kinds of problems that businesses face and then how they solve them. So specifically from like just watching my team, watching specifically the managers and the partners and how they go about thinking about problems, and then seeing how applicable that can be to, very small companies or decently small companies. And then the kind of half reason I had mentioned way earlier is that I'm still unsure about business school. I don't know if I want to stick around in consulting or if business school is the right path for me. And so that's kind of the half reason that's still up in the air. But of course, I'll keep y'all updated as I continue thinking about that and figuring out what I want to do later on in life. So yeah, those are the reasons that I was initially in college interested in consulting, and then even a year into the job now, how my interests have changed and what I still continue to hope to get out of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One of the questions that I have,
Mhm.
which I'm assuming some of you have as well, is when we were in undergrad, consulting was hyped up as a lot as a profession, and I think it's something that a lot of people aim for. So I guess since you've been on the job for a little over a year now, like, did it live up to the hype?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to say a yes or a no. It's kind of a mixture of both. I think the hype can relate to like, the prestige of the job as well as what you might be doing day to day. And so I'll kind of think of it like that perspective. Starting with the day to day. Within undergrad, like we'd go to like recruiting sessions and these companies would pitch that you're really working with the C-level employees, like CEO, CFO, you're working with like the board of directors and their most like the problems that keep them up at night. And I think that's largely true. Of course, not literally every case that Bain or McKinsey or BCG or really any other consulting firm works on is going to be exactly that. There will be much less sexy projects that companies also still need to do. And these companies, of course, these consulting companies will need to make their money doing, those kinds of things. But for example, the current case I'm on right now, we really are doing a pure strategy case, helping this company figure out what their core business is and what they need to be doing in the future, So like a very pure strategy case that I think a lot of people think of when they think of what Bain or McKinsey or BCG does. So I think from like a work day-to-day perspective, the hype definitely lives up, but it might not be on every case basis, but you will definitely get a lot of really exciting cases mixed in with maybe less exciting, more mundane cases. But that's just kind of how the industry is, no matter where you are. And then from the kind of prestige perspective and maybe what that means for exit opportunities or how people look at you, it's like a double-edged sword. Part of it is that you are, I guess, being victim to the hedonic treadmill, which essentially is I'm not a philosopher or a psychologist or whatever, but essentially it states that, like as humans, we will always adapt our happiness and how content we feel with life to the new normal. So like if you get a new car, a new laptop or something, you'll be happy for maybe a couple days, but then afterward you get kind of used to it. And I think the thing like that applies for everything in life, including any flashy jobs you get. And so when we were like recruiting for it, we might have been like over the moon to actually get the offer, right? And we're still grateful for it for sure, but it's one of those things that kind of you don't wake up every morning being like, whoa, I'm a Bain consultant, like it's still cool to be appreciative. And like, don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the fact that I have a job and, Rohit appreciates the fact that, he can go through his senior year not having to worry about like job search and stuff. The hype can definitely die down after you start working. But one thing I have kind of the other end of that coin is that I've done a lot of just like talking to people outside of consulting, outside of Bain to explore my future interests, whether it's in China, whether it's in entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. And I think a lot of people have accepted my reach outs because I have Bain on my LinkedIn or on my resume. Of course, I can't tell. It's not like people are telling me that they're only talking to me because I'm a Bain employee or a Bain consultant. But if I had to put money on it, I would think that it's helped. And so I guess to answer your question, like to kind of summarize my answer, it's the hype definitely lives up in certain places. And then in other places, it might not, but that's okay. Like it's a job at the end of the day and one that I'm enjoying having and glad that I have right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Cool. Well, that being said, let's get into some reasons that maybe the two of us aren't very gung ho about getting into consulting, but I think a lot of other people care about these reasons. And so the first reason for that is private equity. If you don't know what private equity is, it's kind of a field in finance where firms will buy entire companies or maybe stakes in companies, try to improve the companies to be more operationally efficient or just essentially become more valuable, and then they can sell the company and make a profit off of it. But it's kind of a highly coveted field in finance
because it's known to be pretty lucrative.
Yeah, pretty lucrative field in finance. And Bain is a pretty good segue into getting into private equity. So is investment banking. But I think out of the consulting firms, Bain is pretty big on private equity deals. And so I know quite a few people who go into Bain just so that they can get into private equity maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. So yeah, that's the first reason.
Yeah, and then there's a couple more that we wanted to mention. Hopefully some of these will resonate with you all if the other reasons that Rohit and I mentioned didn't. The second one that I've seen so far is that in consulting, you actually get a really good exposure to the social entrepreneurship and social impact world. Within Bain specifically, but I know this definitely applies to the other firms, we do a lot of pro bono consulting for things like the UN or the World Food Program and other just like, I would say, socially driven causes. And so that's a really good way, working in one of these companies is a really good way to get that kind of experience and then also get a better understanding of the ecosystem of things that you can do afterward to fulfill your more mission-driven passions. So yeah, that's something I've seen in my last year is that a lot of people getting that kind of exposure and then eventually like transitioning out of consulting into these kinds of things. And then the third and last thing that Rohit and I wanted to mention in terms of reasons that other people are interested in consulting that might not apply to us is the fact that some people really are gung-ho about wanting to go and eventually be the C-level employee, whether it's CEO, CFO, whatever it might be, of some large company. And so consulting is a really good launch pad for that. And I think a way to see that is, just go look at any Fortune 500 company and look at their C-level employees. And I think I wouldn't say a majority of them, but definitely a good number of them would have Bain, McKinsey, BCG, or any other consulting experience. There's a good likelihood that they'll have some sort of consulting experience. And so people sometimes use consulting as a way to just be able to better prepare them for being able to go into that kind of world. So those are just 3 reasons as to why some people are really interested in consulting, or at least what some people hope to get out of consulting. That didn't necessarily apply to Rohit and I, but hopefully that will help you out in your figuring out if consulting is for you or not. So that's the end of the video, y'all. We hope that you enjoyed hearing about Rohit and Mai's reasons for why we were interested in consulting, as well as reasons that we've seen other people be interested in consulting as well. There's just one last piece of advice that we would like to leave y'all before we end the video. And that's mainly that as you're thinking about consulting, or really anything in your life that you're trying to do right now, because I assume most of y'all are either in college or in a transition period where you're trying to figure out what the next step is one thing that's really benefited Rohit and I is to think deeply about what resonates with you most. And that especially applies when you're thinking about consulting because it's a very shiny, prestigious thing. It can be easy to get swept up and be interested in it, right? We see that with a lot of people around us, and we've probably even been victim to it, right? But try your best to peel back the prestige, peel back the flashiness to see what the job is really about and whether that connects with who you are as a person and what you want to be doing. And the reason that that'll be beneficial is we've thought of three ways. The first one is that it'll be a lot easier for you to find motivation through casing, through reaching out to people, through fixing up your resume, if you are truly interested and know exactly why you want to do consulting. The second reason is that you'll be able to better and more authentically answer the question of why consulting, because you've thought about it, because you have an answer that resonates with you, and because people, especially these partners and managers who are interviewing you, will be able to see that authenticity, right? We even see it when we're talking to people,
Yeah. Especially if someone's explaining something to you and they're passionate about it, you can see it in their eyes.
No, totally. He's exactly right. So just being able to understand exactly why you want to do consulting will help you have that kind of spark in your eyes or the motivation behind your preparation. And then the third reason is that hopefully, what you're planning for works out and you're in consulting. Because you've already done the pre-work to understand why you're in consulting, you'll be able to more tactically or more specifically use your consulting experience to help you set yourself for a better position to whatever you want to do in the future. Rather than finding yourself within consulting and then thinking to yourself, oh, I'm here because all the other smart and driven people did this, but I don't really know what to do next, So just really being able to understand why you want to do consulting and understanding how it connects with you can help you in these 3 kinds of ways.
And with that, we'll close the video. If you like the video, obviously like and subscribe. Put a comment down below if you have any questions. And obviously, if you have any really personal questions that you'd like to ask us, our email is down in the description. So feel free to send us an email.
Cool. See y'all next video.
See ya.